Welcome back to the Vital Strategies Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Lonergan. Have you ever wondered how improving the well-being of your team could be the key to unlocking higher productivity and performance in your business? Today, I'm joined by Andrew Ronchetto, and we're diving into the connection between employee wellness and productivity. We'll explore the 8 dimensions of health, the power of incremental changes, and how creating moments to disconnect can actually amplify performance. Andrew also shares practical tips on capability building, strategic alignment, and how leaders can overcome collaboration struggles to drive their teams forward. If you're interested in building a thriving team and enhancing your company's performance, you'll enjoy the wisdom Andrew shares in this episode. Let's dive in. Andrew, thank you for joining us here today. I am excited about our conversation. You are the co-founder of Beyond, a revolutionary holistic wellness platform. We're going to get into that in a minute, but I'm excited for a few reasons. First, we have a common love of 𝐊𝐞𝐲.
Oh, yeah.
People that are watching the Eagle Eye observer will notice 𝐊𝐞𝐲 in both your background and my background. So we've spent a significant amount of time talking about our 𝐊𝐞𝐲 obsession, which is a lot of fun. But the thing I want to spend the most time talking about is we also see tremendous value in making sure that we have healthy, vibrant work environments and the value that brings to, I'll say, the individuals as well as the organization in general. So welcome. Thank you for joining us here today.
It's great to be here, and I'm excited about the topic because we're both obviously very passionate about it. So let's dive in and let's do it.
Very good. So I'm going to start off with some of our core values, if that's okay, and because I think it ties into this. So we have 4 core values. The first is love for your team, clients, and community. And our thought process is if we take really good care of the team, we'll be able to impact the clients in a positive way. If we impact the clients, we'll be profitable and we can impact the community. So, and then we move on to growth. We think this also fits into this conversation. Let's grow individually as well as organizationally. And then reliability and communication are the last 2, and those seem to tie together. Things go sideways in the work environment, and we need to communicate when they do, both internally and to our clients, especially considering we've got this virtual work environment. And so, I'm looking forward to talking about if I love my people and want the best for them and I want them to thrive, that's our whole goal, is put you in a position to thrive when we hire you. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that you're well. Can we talk through, can we define wellness? We sort of throw this idea around and it sounds great, but I'm not exactly sure what it means.
No, absolutely. So let's talk about really what wellness means to us. I'd say there's really 8 categories that we define wellness in, and 3 are very common to us. We talk about the physical, we talk about the mental and the spiritual, and there's all these programs and capabilities and tools focused on those areas, but there's less so on the other 5 dimensions that are important, such as relationships, how we are interacting with others in a positive and negative way, our surroundings, where we live, the environments we're in, etc. Financial, that might not have felt like a important topic of wellness, but it definitely is. The next one being professional or career. I mean, we spend at least a third of our life focused on this space. And then the last one being intellectual, challenging ourselves and what it feels like to actually grow from that perspective into new areas that help us learn.
Yeah, I love it because I think we've seen recently the data is now coming out about how disconnected we are from a relationship perspective. We have these, little computers that are tied to us that, we set it down and we start to feel some anxiety, like I can't, be connected to, the thing that's going on in the world. FOMO kicks in. And so, but what I'm noticing is, I think an example, when I was growing up, my parents would start the charcoal barbecue and the neighbors would just start showing up in our backyard. We just had, and there was this sense of community. We all just hung out and people bring some food. And all of a sudden on a Thursday afternoon, we were having a barbecue in our backyard and it was great.
Yep.
I don't know some of my neighbors. I've lived across them for a number of years, and it's just like I'll own it. I've not taken the time and energy to go connect with those people, and it's like, man, I think there's something missing there in from a social health perspective that I'm just not getting. And I know this maybe fits into some of the mental health, which can lead to physical health issues, all of those pieces. But
Sure.
Can we talk a little bit about the relationship piece? Because I think that's an important, very important one.
We definitely should. And I think you hit on a couple of key things there that I just don't want to lose is all of these are interconnected. So without us, trying to think about each one in a silo, I think you touched on it already. Like when we dive into relationships, I actually feel like this one in particular is the one that is so instrumentally influential on all the rest. And the reason for that is if you think about maybe what you're trying to do in your career, to just take an example there, not having mentors or coaches or even a manager providing feedback, I mean, that's a relationship. There's lots of different types of relationships that it can exist in your career, but not having those have an impact, to how successful you're going to feel like you are in your career. So relationships is quickly tied in there. I think one of the things I'll throw out there is you're probably hitting on something that we see a lot. You were talking about backyard barbecues. We could talk about just the loss of different institutions that have really provided this ability to just connect with people in that raw form because you know them. It's a community that you're a part of. Whether you're part of a church, how often, we used to have potlucks at church, or my church, we were doing fish fries in the springtime. But those were always opportunities to connect. So they brought everybody together. Different groups like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, where those naturally were places that not just kids got together, but also adults got together. So what's interesting for me here is we're not seeing those, I would say, grow as quickly as they used to. We're actually seeing some regression there. And I think those are all impacts because we're missing those opportunities to connect with people. And it's those relationships through those experiences that I think fundamentally are critical to our success.
Yeah, that's so good. And almost anybody you talk to, you hear them talk about how busy they are, and I feel like, I don't know what we're necessarily busy with, but I feel like we're running everywhere, and you'd think we'd be interacting with people while we do that, but it doesn't seem like it's the case. We're hustling. I've got 3 kids, and so I feel like I'm hustling kids to stuff all the time. And I've just recently been thinking about this. I'm like, man, the number of like deep, intimate friendships I have is almost non-existent. I have people that I'm close with in my men's group. I have people that I'm close with in my work environments, but like, I don't just like hang out with somebody and just, enjoy the weekend. It just feels like we're on the go. And I've been paying attention to that lately, going, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to be intentional and go find people that sort of align with my values and I want to spend time with, that can help support me and just living a more full life. Because I think we're missing big pieces of this in our society.
Absolutely. I mean, I see it as well myself. We're both entrepreneurs, and it can definitely feel like you're just running around nonstop. And then, like you said, family. I've got 2 daughters. They're both younger, so I'm totally hearing and feeling the same vibes as you in this regards. And I was talking about this actually with my neighbors. What's interesting is for some of us, when we can, and I'm going to say this is like maybe once a quarter. That's probably how crazy busy we all are. But like at 9:00 at night, after the kids have gone down, we'll be like out in the street or on the sidewalk, just having a drink with each other, because that's the moment we could actually get together and just take a pause from life and catch up. And it's crazy that it probably looks weird because we're, 9:00, just the street light and everything, but totally works for us. And I think we enjoy it. And it's just one way we try to connect, to your point, because it matters.
Yeah.
And we can rely on each other when I think we need it most. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So when I think about these 8 components of wellness, I think there's this level of, I'm going to use physical health because it's the easiest one. We think about our healthcare system right now. A lot of this is sort of driven by insurance, but it's not to optimize my wellness. It's to treat my sickness. And so the thing I am very intentional on in my life is like, I want to be proactive versus reactive. So you bring these things up and now they get me thinking about, okay, I almost need to do a self-assessment and figure out on a scale of 1 to 10, where am I at in these components to go, which one needs the most attention? So can you talk a little bit about how we can be proactive in these things versus reactive? Because I think a reactive example would be, again, how all of these things are so well, tied together. It's like we see some of our clients that are just grinding, and then all of a sudden somebody has a mental breakdown and they're out of the game for a couple of weeks because
they need to recharge.
Their body, right? Yep. Just said no mas, I'm done. So can you talk a little bit about how we can work on being proactive versus our default, which is generally reactive in these things?
Absolutely. And I think this is one of the areas that is missing the most in all the capabilities that we have for us today. Like, I mean, we could get an app for each one of these dimensions for sure. But the problem is the interconnectedness. And I think you touch on it, but we go straight at it. We're like, look, we're consciously making subconscious decisions on all of these aspects because we're running around. And I think the problem is and the practical answer to this is, so we need to stop. We need to take the subconscious and make it conscious. And I think there's a few elements to this because you're like, well, wait a second. So now you're telling me I got to focus on all 8 things all at the same time and figure it out. Like I'm already stressed out with everything I got to get going. And what I want to throw out there is say, no, not necessarily. I think there is an important aspect of moving it from that subconscious decision-making level to the conscious level, that you're now having visibility to its impact on other areas of your life. So taking the physical example is a very easy one. We always talk about New Year's resolutions and we're like, I'm going to do this one thing differently this next year. And a lot of folks struggle with that and I think it's not because a lack of desire. I think we miss that part of it. I think it is, we make it as a conscious decision, but all of this undertone of subconscious things we already have going on are impacting our ability to go after it. Like maybe I don't have time. And I've felt that before myself, trying to work with some coaches. They're like, well, give me a couple hours a day. If you can do that, we can make this happen. I'm like, okay, I can figure out a couple hours, for a little bit of nutrition, for, working out, etc. But what it translated in actually to me was actually a few hours, which was just pushing me over the edge because then I was impacting my health or my sleep, I should say. And so I was starting to hit myself in some other areas. And I didn't really appreciate or understand that until I started to say, here are all the practices in my life that I've got going on. And I like to think about grouping them into a couple of categories. You could probably have more than one category or 2 categories, depending on how you kind of see your week play out. But I see the first category being the work week, so when you actually got to get into your job, and that, has a substantial pull on what your available time is. So if you say I'm going to do 8 hours of sleep a day as a practice, and I'm going to go to work for 8 hours a day, which is another practice, mind you, like you're investing that time, then you're down to 16 hours. And I can talk about project management and coefficients and efficiency and all of that. But that 8 hours is quickly consumed. That remaining 8 hours is quickly consumed by everything else. And then I think there's another category, which is when you're not working. And that one, of course, hopefully still has the 8 hours of sleep to it. But the ability to flex in other ways, I think, is where that category is unique. And so the reason why I bring this up is because from a practical perspective, just going through that process and thinking about the category, the 2 categories or 2 columns, and then thinking about all the key items or practices and prioritizing them, Sleep maybe is the number one important thing for you, then followed by job, then followed by eating. Maybe that's the wrong order, but it's yours. It's a practical, conscious look at how much time do you have left to get after all these other things. And the last thing I'll add to that is I know things are going to fall below the line, as I like to say. Like you just don't have enough time, and it's okay that it's on the list. Because for the first time ever, you're now seeing that, hey, this is something that is important to you. It's just not fitting in the way you want it to. And instead of subconsciously feeling like you just are failing and that you're not able to get after it, now you can consciously say, well, do I want to do something about that? And be okay with the decision you're making, or start to make decisions to change the outcome that you're looking for. So that for me is the practicality about how we can go after this a little.
Yeah, I love it. And I heard Tim Ferriss say this once, and I think it applies to the things we're talking about here. He said, I spend a lot of time figuring out what the big domino is. What is that one thing? If I knock that domino down, it like puts the rest of the things in motion. And so part of me is like, when we think about our priorities, maybe we need to go, what is that one big thing that if I just make a change there, it will have an impact, and I'm okay deleting out the rest of these things. Because I think there's this, we can be ruled by the shoulds of life, right? Like I heard somebody say, you should all over yourself. And it's like, no, like delete those shoulds. Like I don't need to sign up for the PTA. I don't need to be volunteering on all these boards at the expense of my own well-being. And so I think there's a level of like, let's reduce down to making sure that I'm okay. I'm doing the things that are going to like move the needle for me and my wellness. And then I can slowly start add these things back in. Because if I'm operating from an empty tank, it just, it doesn't work. So,
I mean, if it were me, and I think this is more of a US perspective kind of coming into here, I feel like that big domino for most of us is going to be sleep.
Yes.
Honestly, like I know everybody talks about 8 hours of sleep, and there's even, different items out there that suggest women should even get even more sleep than that. But the point being is, I don't think any of us generally in a consistent practice get 8 hours of sleep, and we're always pushing up against that because we're trying to relax, trying to decompress, trying to get everything else done, eat, ... And so I think that's a big one for me. That actually, that from a personal perspective, and that's maybe why I talk about it, is the domino. That's been the domino for me, because for so long in my consulting career, I would say it was the one that I just let go because it was more important to do other things to me. And the detriment that it's caused over a decade plus of strain, let's say, has definitely now started to materialize as I've gotten older.
Yep. That's interesting, because we had Dr. Tom McCoy on the podcast, and he's a medical practitioner, but very much on the let's be proactive and optimize our health. And he said the same thing. He goes, I don't care if you're an elite athlete or executive or just regular person. It starts with sleep. It starts with your rest and getting recharged and making sure that you're checking that box first. And like I wear this thing called Whoop that tracks my sleep and recovery and all those things. And it's like I've just become a geek about the data, and I've started to figure out what moves the needle for me on my rest and recovery. Like alcohol screws it up. Even a few drinks, it's like my recovery score is just terrible. We think we go to sleep better with some alcohol, but our rest actually isn't near as good as it is without it. So, those things are critical. And I do appreciate you bringing that up. And I also think I've read a couple books lately on the Sabbath. Okay. And whether you believe that from a religious perspective, that's something you should do or not, there's all this data that just supports the fact that productivity goes up when we are completely disconnected for a day. We're not checking our email, not, making some phone calls, doing some work things, like really just truly resting. And So I've been practicing that. I've created some boundaries on my phone where it creates some friction that I have to get through to get to my email. And so because my default is I pick the thing up and I hit the email app and I'm like, just stop doing that, Yep. So it's reminds me nope, not today. And it's you're right. Thank you. So, and I've just noticed I'm ready for the week and feel good throughout the week when I'm taking those days on the weekend where I'm just disconnected. So
I wish some of the capabilities in modern technology would allow you to have that detail of notification shutting on and shutting off, because I don't feel like they want to go to that level of detail. It's every day is the same to them. I'm but it's not right. To me. I was talking about the buckets a moment ago and what you do during the week and off the week. And I love what you're talking about there. And I call them digital detox moments myself, because I even to your point and extending it further, I think there's so much we can do even during the week where it's, we try as a family to have dinner together. And that's a big deal for us. But it's not a great thing if every time, you're at the dinner table, you take a bite and then you look at the phone and you're okay, so how can I be there and present? And for me, that's a very positive detox moment. And I've gotten to the point, my wife has as well, where we just leave our phones on the counter. Versus, but I would tell you, if somebody, and this goes back to the whole, figuring out what's okay for you. If for somebody else, it's well, okay, I can't put it on the counter, but if I can put it upside down right next to me, 2 thumbs up, man, because that is a digital detox moment. And that's where you're at the moment. And you got to celebrate that, praise it, and go with it. And so absolutely, I love it. Because I think we have to be less conscious about well, how extreme have you gone with your detox versus me? And just think about how I'm working on myself in a positive way that I think is helpful for me.
Yeah. And this is such a great point, because one thing that I think people think they need to do is make some radical change. And I think what we discount is the incremental changes that are expanded over a long period of time and the impact they can have. So it might start with me having dinner with my phone down versus in my hand. And then it moves to it's on the counter. Then it moves to after I get home from work, I shut the thing off and put it in a drawer and I don't look at it till the next morning. It can progress through those things. And then we're going to start to see the benefits of that in all these areas, our relationships, our rest. I remember, I got on Facebook a number of years ago because I remember my kid was trying to talk to me and I'm gorked out scrolling, and I'm what am I doing? This human being that I love and care about is trying to interact with me. And I'm, getting caught up in whatever's happening out in the world that's actually not even interesting. So we're forget this. We're just creating this boundary. And when I'm at home, I'm going to be engaged with the people that I care about. So 100%. Yes, I think that's a important point that you made. These incremental improvements can be tremendous.
Well, and without going, I'm sure we could have 1,000 rabbit holes on this conversation, but I think it goes to the importance about how we look at all of the dimensions of what it means for holistic wellness, and then how we go after journeys on each of them, because I feel we have to reset this expectation of instant gratification. And that's a key component for me here is why I'm trying to celebrate the win with the digital detox moment, because it might feel like instant gratification there, but it's progress towards where you're trying to get. And I think that's the other thing we have to think about in all these other journeys of life is there's not a quick fix. You don't go to the gym, come back and lose 10 pounds. Right? It's going to take some time and but you need the encouragement and where the relationships come in. You need the different things that are tell you or help you or show you you're on the right path. Let's keep on it and let's keep at it.
Yeah. And I think that's an important thing. I heard this guy talk and then I went and bought the book and it was on happiness and he was a Harvard researcher and we'll put it in the show notes because I don't remember it off the top of my head, but he defined happiness as the realization of our potential. And so what that looks like is actually a lot of hard work. It's not comfort in the moment. And sometimes we have to sacrifice these things that our comfort that we sort of think are happiness, like the cheeseburger and the Coke. It's I might feel good in the short term, but it's actually not helping me in the long term. So I think that That's great. So we've talked about a number of things. We've talked about sort of the mental, physical, spiritual piece. We've talked about relationships and environment. Now let's maybe shift that to, I'll call them the financial, professional, and intellectual components, because I feel like those are kind of the work environment a little bit. And I absolutely agree. Our financial life's a mess. It's stressful and it's really challenging. Same thing. You're so right on with the amount of time we spend at work. That environment should be supporting me in my journey right through this life. And I think about the intellectual piece and how that sort of fits in with that, right? Like if I'm intellectually stimulated and challenged to grow, and I think all of those, but it's hard to show up in my career if the rest of my environment, my mental, physical, spiritual health's out of whack, my relationships are out of whack. It's challenging. So I think those pieces really matter. Can you just talk a little bit about those and how they contribute to wellness?
Absolutely. And I'm going to kind of bring an example here for me, which is about this pendulum swinging between employees and employers a little, because I feel like today and for the longest time, we have felt that I either support the employee and their well-being, or I get after, productivity and financials and bottom line. And that's the way it's been for the longest time. We saw it even, as we went through the pandemic, I would say. And now we're coming out of that. And one of the things that, it's crazy to think about is we keep talking about figuring out what the new normal is. And I think this is a part of that conversation. And, when I've talked with or heard back from like board members and CEOs and owners about this conversation, a lot of the time it has always been this one or the other. I can either focus on my people or I can focus on making some money. And I think it's not a wrong perspective for the longest time, but I think it is one for where we're at today to say, well, you got to focus on both, because it's not a chicken and the egg. You're not going to make money if you don't have people, because you can't do everything. And you're not going to have, people if you don't make money. So like which one comes first? And so you got to kind of push both of them forward at the same time. And I think when we talk about the intellectual and the career and the financial side of it, it starts to bring all those questions together for everyone. So the way I look at it is, how can we weave it into the day? We were just talking about earlier about like the practices and being conscious about those practices, both during the workday and then outside of the work week and whatnot. How can employers be a part of that conversation? Because this is, again, they still have some priorities they need to get after. And I'm not suggesting that they need to slow down or reduce those priorities to go after well-being. It's more like, let's change the conversation. Because that goes back to what we were talking about this reactive insurance experience that we have is the problem is only dealt with after you've put in your 8 hours. And what I want us to think about there is how we weave it into the day, not because we're saying we want you to be less productive, but actually we want you to be more productive by being conscious about all of these other aspects happening in your life. And we need tools to support that. That's kind of what we're building here at Beyond is tools to support that, because one, we need to move into some real-time insights, but we got to create trust in that, because we're asking for more visibility into to who I am as an employee. And I would say we could talk about trust and go down that rabbit hole, but there's also autonomy that's associated to that. There's resiliency that you talk about, love. I mean, there's all these dimensions that come together to mean, what does it mean to bring the two together of productivity and wellness from my perspective? So there's a lot of nuanced things that need to happen. We've got to work on the cultural side of things, the trust side of things to open up this area. But, as a metric, it's a lot of money, but organizations today are losing anywhere between $300 billion to over $1 trillion due to lost productivity. And that is all driven off of people. So the two are so interconnected that us not focusing on them together and seeing how they push each other forward, I think is where the miss is.
This is great. There's so many things I want to touch on here. So I just finished a book called Unconventional Hospitality. I think it's Unreasonable Hospitality. I believe it's Unreasonable Hospitality. And we're going to put that in the show notes too. But one of the things he talked about was we need to do what's best for the restaurant. Okay. It was a restaurant founder. And he goes, what's best for the restaurant is I have to run a profitable business. I also have to take tremendous care of my people. If I don't do that, it's going to impact the bottom line. And it doesn't matter how much bottom line I have if I can't take care of my people, because my people make this organization go. And so I think goes back to one of your initial points. It's like, it's not an either or. I think it's an and scenario, like, and fits into this lost productivity piece. Like, I can give people time during the day to go to a therapy session, right? I can pay for the therapy. I can give them time to go for a walk. I can create a athletic facility for them to work out over the lunch hour and sort of be refreshed. I can give them opportunities to take a nap. We look at some of the great thinkers of our, the last, few generations, and they were nappers, right? Like, why wouldn't we do that to allow? I've got a cot in my office. I take a nap pretty regularly because it's like, I know that 15 minutes I'm going to wake up and be refreshed and so much better than if I just kept grinding through. So I think that is a key distinction. Can you talk us through where are we losing productivity, right? Like, I think the easy one is to see I got hurt on the job and I can't come to work. But my guess is there's layers to this that we're losing out on productivity as employers.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm going to say it's probably in some ways unique to every employer because of situations. But some of the big areas that I tend to see is an administrative work. We could talk about the lack of focus on operations, which translates into more administrative tasks, which translates into inefficiencies. And we can talk about RPA, how it's supposed to resolve those things, but then you're dealing with ROI on RPA but I think
can you tell me what RPA is?
Oh yeah. Sorry. My bad. It's such a technical guy here that robotic process automation. So this idea of having a bot streamline activities that normally somebody might do in 3 clicks, and now it just happens automatically for them. But administrative tasks is a big one there. I think then that also, the next loss of productivity is actually in training, ironically. I've seen this myself because I've experienced it. Like I go and I have to go do a number of web-based learning sessions or be at a conference because that's what the job requires. So it's not even really specific to me or my experiences. But then I've also seen it where executives have talked about, one guy wrote a whole article on this. He's like, I was in the learning space for my entire career. I retired, VP. I was really excited about everything we did to help the frontline worker. And he's like, so I just decided for fun, I'm going to become a frontline worker. And he was like, it was so insightful for him to realize, he was like, oh my God, there's no way. I asked them for 3 days of their time to go, 8 hours a day, just download information into their brain as if that was the way they operated as an individual. He's like, I thought I did, but I definitely don't after this experience. And then out into the world they go as if they have totally, understood and comprehended everything, and they're ready to engage with customers. Yeah. And I think these are some, 2 key examples where it just instantly falls apart and we lose productivity. And then the last one I'm going to bring up, I think this has a lot to do with the executive team, the management team, the leadership team, in terms of thinking about what they're asking their people to do and how does that translate into actual work. What was fascinating for me is there was a general a long time ago talking about that they needed to repaint the yellow lines on the road coming into one of the bases. And so he gave it as a task to his management team and came back like 3 months later and noticed that it hadn't been painted yet. And so the first thing he does is like, well, why is the line not painted? They're like, well, we had to do the study to figure out the right color of the yellow, the right, how many times to go over it. So he was like, just go grab the paint bucket, go paint paint the line on the road for me. But it just, I use that example here because I think sometimes we don't always articulate the intention of what we're asking. And that also creates inefficiencies in productivity. So it's just, there's lots of different ways this can materialize, but it most of the time comes back to leadership and management and how we, I would say, look to lead and show intent and then set the guardrails and then follow up with coaching and advice and follow through to say how things are working or not, and also getting feedback in that cycle.
Yeah, I love it. So I'm going to take coaching and collaboration and sort of shove them together here because I'm just going back to that frontline worker scenario with leadership team. And it's like coaching needs to be a part of that. And I think the way coaching happens best is I probably show you how the job's done. I have you demonstrate how the job's done, and then I let you go do it. And then I'm going, oh, hey, if you do this thing better or different, like you'll get a better outcome. And then I come back later and I sort of do the same thing. I sort of fine tune along the way versus give you, a video to watch 8 hours a day for 3 days and expect you to like fully understand that job role and every aspect of it, where you probably just are trying to pick up the big pieces to go execute the basics. So I think that's one piece of it. And then I think the collaboration side of it too is like being able to have open communication between the frontline and the leadership and go, hey, here's a better way to do this. Or I need some help over here because I don't know what to do about this. Because I think there's oftentimes this like one-way street of communication top down versus like having it be able to flow back up. So can you talk a little bit about like maybe the collaboration piece and how valuable that is to sort of building an effective organization that has this sort of wellness baked in? So
yeah, I mean, my perspective on this is probably it starts with leadership. And I was talking with somebody the other day. I think there are two challenges we as leaders have. One is pride. Like, we've gotten to that position. We've been successful. We're there. And I think it's sometimes it pushes too far because I think you should be prideful, like, celebrate the things you've been able to do, but it can go too far into the thought process that I have to know everything. Yeah. I think that goes to one of your points there. The second one for me is vulnerability. I think too often when we get to that level, the ability for me to express that maybe I'm feeling the same things you are, but I can't relate with you on them because I got to toe the line or whatever the reason might be, I think is partly where we see that breakdown in collaboration and trust and engagement from the frontline worker, and the executive. For me, that's where when we talk about collaboration and creating that there, it's got to start with the leaders. I think it's fascinating that people think that it's the responsibility of the frontline worker, the employee, to tell you how they're feeling. It's like, are you crazy? I might lose my job for doing that. Like, maybe you don't want to hear it. Like, maybe I think you're doing a horrible job and I want to tell you that, but I can't because I need the money. Like, but what it needs, that whole relationship needs to be flipped around. And it's really on leaders to go after that. I think part of the challenge is leaders are sometimes, or managers are thrust into that position and they don't even want to be there. And then they're not getting the coaching they need to really do their job appropriately, because what they're really thinking about is, I still want to be on the floor. Right. But now because of, rank or experience or time, whatever it might be, the factor, they've now pushed themselves into that next level. And it, they also have some imbalance there. How many of those have actually ever told their employees that that's the way they feel? I don't know. It goes right back to vulnerability, pride, creating collaboration and building that and cultivating what it means to really interact with each other.
Yeah, that's great. And in my mind, like that all starts from a excellent leader creating a culture that is just saying, hey, they also understand I don't have all the answers. I need your feedback and input for us to grow and be better. Going back to, the best thing for the organization is for you to thrive and us to run a profitable business. And so for you to thrive, I need you to communicate with me so I can support you in the ways you need it. So I think that's great. And I think having a front row seat to how very successful firms run their businesses. We've seen a couple different camps. The ones that grow consistently over a long period of time are doing all these things you're talking about. They're very interested in taking great care of their people in every aspect. Now, there's sometimes they'll forget about one, go, oh, we need to wrap this into the equation. And then on the other side, it's like sometimes we'll see these fast growing companies that have I don't know, this term's used too often, narcissist leader, that is just self-focused, that will just drive people, but then all of a sudden they quit, they leave, we've seen an owner forced out of their own business, the sort of mutiny took place. And it's like, yeah, that just doesn't sustain itself over the long term. It's just not, it's not good for both the employee and the organization. Actually, both, suffer in that example. So this is
100%.
I appreciate all of this insight. So let's talk about growth. Let's talk about how, because I think there's a little bit of, it's hard to measure the ROI if I pay for my team's mental health counseling, right? Because it just looks like an expense to me. It's hard to see the return in productivity. Can you? I don't know if there's any good ways to quantify it, but is there ways we can go? All right, when we take care of our people, this is what it starts to turn into in bottom line. And you already gave us one example of the potentially $1 trillion that's lost and missed out productivity. But yeah, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I kind of would say we bucket it into 4 categories. So, and these are things that I think blend well between focusing on wellness and focusing on productivity. So the first one for me is really, as I like to call it, capability building or skill building, depending on the way you look at it. But do my people have the skills they need to do the job I'm asking them to do? Now, there's a lot packed into that in the sense that, have I actually defined the job role effectively? Because I'm sure we've all experienced that where it's like, and you tell us what you think will help you be successful. But honestly, like there are some key things in there that we need to be able to translate back to skills. Can you, if you're in a senior position and it's consulting, can you sell? Because I need you to sell and what it means to sell, for example. So the skill building is a key one there. The second part is regardless of the level or the experience is coaching and mentorship. So this is kind of taking the skill building and then applying it like you were talking about momentarily ago. And I think there is a direct correlation to that experiential guidance that maybe a little bit harder to collect on the ROI side of it. Except when maybe something negatively happens because it's like you forgot to check box A and box A means we collected taxes incorrectly. I mean, there's a material impact to that. I either have to redo the invoice if they already paid. I mean, we could talk about the time or cost associated to doing it wrong. And so that's an example, but experiential guidance is a space. Then I talk about strategic alignment. So I think we also oftentimes forget about how much strategic alignment from an individual to the corporate level or the organizational level is critical to productivity. If we're misaligned in where we're trying to go, you might have team members off running down a set of tasks that are completely irrelevant. Like they're just not helpful. So you're losing, it's costing you money for them to be focused on things that are misaligned with your strategy. And some of that can be driven by wellness directly. Maybe they're going down that path, I was talking with somebody not too long ago, and they were talking about how the company was downsizing. So the strategy is changing. Like the company, is adjusting due to its economic conditions. And everybody, they weren't sure who was going to lose their job, but everybody started to run, almost in a fashion of trying to say, well, hey, look at all the things I'm doing that should help me to be here. But that creates a lot of inefficiency, and there's a communication or a lack of communication to align the two items. But then the flip side of it is why was everybody trying to run? Well, there's financial impacts, there's personal impacts, And so the wellness side of seeing that impact and what it meant because you communicated X, it's almost like A/B testing. If I communicate X to this group of people and Y to that group of people, how do they react differently in terms of how they're feeling? And then the last one for me is wellness, which can translate into more sustainable operations. If people are getting enough sleep, if they are showing up to work versus having sick days. I never realize people get sick, so I'm not suggesting it doesn't happen, but what's the incremental impact because I'm focused on wellness? And as a result, I'm seeing people more present, in the moment when I need them there, and I'm not having to backfill all the time.
Absolutely. And I think there's two things that I'd like to maybe highlight or get your thoughts on. So one is we were talking, there's this peer group I'm involved in, and they were talking about how you earn your vacation. And the data says if I don't take at least 2 weeks of vacation, I'm less productive than if I was there the whole time. So in my mind, I'm like, give them all the vacation to start with. They need it to be well, right? So I think that factors in and is an important piece. And then strategic alignment. This is something that I think I've screwed up before, and I see organizations have an issue with it. What we're measuring and maybe even bonusing on, we think this is an important thing, but actually we get some unintended consequence that takes the employees' incentives and puts them out of alignment with the corporate incentives. And it's like, okay, we gotta unwind this whole bonus structure because we're not getting the outcomes that we were hoping in this situation. So, and then looking at the other two, skill building and coaching, it's like those are sort of no brainers, right?
Absolutely.
There's a saying what if I train my people and leave? And they leave, and it's like, well, what if you don't train them and they stay? It's like, I'd rather take the chance. And in my mind, if we create an environment that people are just thriving in, they don't necessarily want to leave. They're happy to be here. So, and I think that just fits nicely with the coaching and mentoring. So I don't know if you have any thoughts or comments on the vacation and then the compensation structures and making sure you get those dialed in. But we've seen those two play out.
Yeah, so I'm going to hit on vacation for a moment here because I think there's this double-edged sword is people talk about unlimited vacation, but then they're like, you have a utilization target. And so all of a sudden, okay, well, which one's more important? It's like, well, the utilization target is focused on the corporate outcomes and whatnot. Okay, well, what if I need that extra time? Something's happening in my life that's, is pushing me down that path that I need more time. But I'm still delivering, I'm still doing the things you need me to, and just not hitting the target you expect. So I think sometimes we see that intention to be there, to say give you all the time, but then we reel it back in and say, well, only if. So I think we have to be conscious of what we're doing when we do that. I'm supportive of this idea of not overcomplicating what it means to be out of the office for personal time. I think there are tax reasons, and I'm not an accountant, so I can't speak on all of the dimensions of why I would have somebody classify their time out of the office in one way or another. But that aside for a second here, I think we just have to appreciate, depending on the role, that there are certain roles and professions where a degree of autonomy is critical. And we need to encourage that autonomy exists in order for us to get the most I'm going to say from that individual. Now, if somebody starts a new job and in the first month they want to take 2 weeks off, okay, well, we need to have a conversation about
Sure.
that, you know?
Yep.
But I don't think it should, like, feel like those are more outliers than they are the status quo. And that's what we need to, we don't need to hit it with a hammer when we can poke it with a needle.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Thank you. So I love all these concepts about wellness and how it helps the organization grow and be more productive. And then it's also great for the individual. Can you walk us through beyond and how you get involved in organizations and help them, I'll say, recognize the value of this wellness?
Absolutely. So one of the things I'm going to throw out here is I think the first thing to do is focus on the individual. From an organization perspective, what we're talking about amplifying is human performance. But what that means is we need to focus on the individual. And so when we get engaged with an organization or even working with coaches and practitioners who are in support of that organization, the idea here is that the technology is oriented around the individual and what they need to go after a journey. And that's the step where we work with the organization to define out what that journey is. I think so often we have it up in our minds as to here are the 10 things they need to do to get onboarded or the skills they need. And maybe we've written it down on paper, maybe we haven't, but it feels like more of a checklist. Like, did we do it? Did we do it in the time we needed to versus a progressive conversation? So what we're building out with organizations in the platform are these journey templates that say, well, at a bare minimum, starting a new operations role as a junior operations analyst or whatever the title might be, these are the 5 things they have to do to get going in that job. But these are the other 10 things we might have them do because it's unique to the person or the specific function, whatever it might be. And being able to put that into kind of a templatized experience that, one, helps you standardize it because there's efficiency, reduce the administration, but then 2, create some consistency in it for the experience of the manager, the individual, so that they can come in and look at it during regular checkups or check-ins. And so we're helping kind of build that whole flow, but do it in a way that doesn't require tons of effort to get there. And most importantly, allow you to adjust it over time, almost in a real-time basis. You're like, hey, I want to add these few other capabilities to every one of these types of journeys. Let me just drop it in there, make people aware that that's what we're doing, why we're doing it. So communication, trust, and then get it, move forward with it. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're doing with Beyond, is just really helping to streamline that whole user experience on both sides of it, rather than it feeling like on the organizational side, here's what it looks like. And then on the individual side, here's what it looks like. And it's totally different. So we're focused on those few areas and streamlining that and giving them the tools to really have conversations around this.
I love it. And I think there's some really interesting data out there too about long-term employee, I'll call it satisfaction or longevity with the company, is determined in like the first 90 days or less, I think, with their onboarding and training. So it's like, if you fumble that, man, your turnover's up, how dissatisfied people are. And the fact that you come in and are like, here, let us help you address this journey to like get up to speed, feel cared for, develop, because people want to be good at their job. They want to show up and do a great job. And it's like, if you give them the tools to do that, I think that's fantastic.
And then I think it's also about linking across it. So I didn't mention this, but I don't see like experiential guidance separate from, but I also don't see it totally integrated into like capability building and, skills and whatnot. So I think you could have this journey or this experience with the manager, And it's really tactical into the performance side of, are we getting you to, level you up to where we need you to be for this role? But then I see it as a second journey of really just an ongoing career mentorship that is running alongside that role. And you can see what's happening across both of them. The mentor can see it as well. Like, hey, are you getting things done? And rather than having a secondary checklist, it's like, well, I know you had these 5 items to do. Have you done it yet? So now you're updating 2 people on the same thing in 2 different spots. But having that other underlying journey on the career mentorship side. Okay, so how's it going? And we translate this into like, new employee, was it like mentors, but also like sidekicks, depending on what you call it, like somebody who was just through it can show you all the ropes of how it was, help, improve your experience. But I think they still need tools as well, because they're not necessarily always in tune with what the expectation for you is. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. That, like, I just think about our organization. We have peers come alongside somebody that's new and say, "Hey, here's sort of the tricks of the trade, right? For lack of a better term, to learn some of these things." But like you mentioned, if I don't give that peer the tools to effectively communicate those things and maybe observe and see what issues need to be addressed, they're not going to have a lot of success in that role, sort of helping their new hire that's working with them. So,
yep, exactly.
Good. This is great. And so, can you walk us through, like, what size organization does this make sense to engage with you on? Is it, if I've got 3 or 4 people, or do I need 500 people? What size organization does this start to make sense?
Well, we're definitely looking at it from a micro and macro perspective here. I think these are challenges that, regardless of the size of your organization, you're going to experience in different ways. And you're also going to end up spending more or less time on, depending on the size of your organization. Because obviously with a smaller organization, you probably interact more frequently with everybody involved. But they still need some of the core important aspects of, do I understand my role? Are we on the same page about what you're asking me to do versus what I'm actually doing? So same problems, but different scale issues, versus in an organization where you have probably multiple layers and everything somehow has to get aggregated up and spread out. So you have more complex problems, but at the end of the day, the same intention or outcomes to occur, that you have the engagement, you have the clarity. So we definitely look to help the larger organizations. We see that especially today. We can see it in news articles. We can see it in NPS, employee surveys about how they feel about their wellness, how they feel about their companies. Like, there are big problems in large companies that we can solve there, and we're where we're orienting ourselves, I'll say. But this does not preclude other organizations that are on the smaller side that are looking to have tools and assets that don't break the bank. That I think is a key element here, that will help them drive this clarity. And as they look to scale, or maybe they don't, but as they look to scale, if some do, they can take it with them and evolve it with time.
I love it. This is great. Because you said an important thing that got my attention, and I think we've touched on this a few times, but oftentimes there's this disconnect between what the employee thinks their job is and what the leadership thinks their job is. and oftentimes people will be like, yeah, my job is to get this outcome. And we're like, no, we need you to get that outcome, right?
Yep.
And we go back to painting the lines on the road, and it's like, they think their outcome is to like figure out how to get the perfect line on the road. And the organization's like, we can't have cars running into each other. That's your outcome. Like, please put the lines on the road so they don't hit each other, So that's great. And I think just slowing down to create that clarity is a fantastic thing. So if somebody wants to learn more about Beyond, what is the best way for them to get plugged into you and your organization?
Well, there's a couple ways for us. Of course, you can go to our website, beyondplatform.com. But you can also follow us on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn. We do a lot more posting out there on a regular basis, like these types of great conversations, because I think it all begins with awareness. And it takes time to cultivate a perspective and a thought on it. And I can't say that we're always going to agree with everybody on it, but I think the most important thing here is we're starting a broader conversation on the topic, and we're trying to do that via social media. So one of those two places will get you engaged with us, and we hope that you join us and follow us and connect and communicate and, collaborate, let's say, on these big challenging items.
This is fantastic. And the thing that I love about the work you're doing is it creates lasting impact in people. If I help you develop as a human being, whether you stay in my organization or not, like the impact there is well beyond what we did in these walls, so to speak, right? And so I love the work you're doing and the impact it's having. I think it's fantastic. So thank you, Andrew. Look forward to the next time we get a chat about Lego and all things wellness. So
absolutely.
Have a great day.
Thank you so much for the time today.
As we are getting our year-end tax strategies implemented for our clients, we wanted to give you the tools that you need to save big money on tax this year. To get access to the tools to help create a strategy, go to vitalstrategies.com/cornerstones. If you're one of the first 100 people to register, we'll give you free access to the tools that our clients have paid us tens of thousands of dollars for. These tools are designed to help you pay less tax so you can build more wealth and live a great life. Again, that website is vitalstrategies.com/cornerstones. I want to remind you to rate and review the Vital Strategies podcast on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps us towards our goal of saving our clients and listeners over $1 billion in taxes. These dollars are better used in your hands versus the government bureaucracy. Thank you for listening and for being a vital entrepreneur. You're vital because you're the backbone of our economy, creating opportunities for your employees and driving growth. You're vital to your family, fostering abundance not only financially, but in all aspects of life that matter. Finally, you're vital to me because you strive to build wealth, make an impact through your business, and live a great life.